Welcome to Mixie Veteran Stories, where silence speaks louder than medals, and forgotten heroes remind us what respect really means. If you've ever judged someone too quickly, this story will stay with you. She didn't walk in with a salute. She didn't wear ribbons or badges or a nameplate, just a black windbreaker, worn boots, and eyes that had seen more than most of the cadets would ever read in their textbooks. To them, she looked like somebody's aunt. Maybe someone who got lost on the way to a family day event. They laughed when she stepped through the gate, not cruelly, but with that soft, unthinking kind of arrogance that comes from youth and certainty. But then the scanners picked up something the eye missed. A call sign. A name not spoken in over a decade. One word that turned an entire military academy hallway into complete silence. Shadowhawk. This isn't just about credentials. It's about assumptions, about how quickly we forget that the quietest ones often carry the heaviest stories, and how dangerous it is to mistake humility for irrelevance. What happened next rewrote the cadets' understanding of honor, and reminded them that sometimes legends don't die. They just stop talking, until the world is ready to listen. So, before we dive in, tell us in the comments, have you ever misjudged someone, only to realize later who they really were? Let's begin. Griffin Military Academy was all motion and precision that morning. Boots on pavement, cadence calls echoing across the quad. A place where discipline was muscle memory and authority wore uniforms. So when a woman walked through the east gate wearing no insignia, no ID, and no rank on display, the system hesitated. Her name was Evelyn Hart, 58 years old. Her windbreaker zipped to the collar, cargo pants faded from years of wear, and a duffel bag slung over one shoulder like it weighed nothing. No makeup, no smile, just a calm, deliberate walk that turned no heads, at first. Cadet Nathan Doyle stood at the security desk, his uniform spotless, posture textbook perfect. He saw her approach and stepped forward with the confidence of someone who'd been taught that protocol was protection. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "this wing is restricted access. Visitor parking is back by the west entrance." Evelyn stopped. Her voice was soft. "I'm expected." Evelyn Hart, mentorship session. Doyle didn't blink. "Identification?" She reached into her jacket and handed him a folded letter. Official, signed by a Major Riley. But Doyle barely glanced at it. "Paper isn't clearance," he said. "Regulations require visible credentials during Officer Candidate Week." Behind him, another cadet chuckled. "She's probably admin support." A third smirked. "Some contractor's mom, maybe." Evelyn didn't react. She just stepped back and waited. No explanation, no argument, just stillness. The kind of stillness that unsettled because it didn't match their expectations. Doyle handed the letter back. "I'll have to verify this with command." And that's when something slipped from the side of her bag. A laminated card, edges worn. Most of the writing faded, but one line stood clear in black ink. Call sign, Shadowhawk. Cadet Jacob Lynn, seated nearby reviewing notes, saw it. His stylus paused mid-mark. His breath caught. Shadowhawk wasn't a name you just made up. It was one of those whispered code names, buried in redacted reports. A figure from missions no one officially admitted happened. The kind of name you found only in leak forums or war stories veterans told in low voices. He looked at Evelyn again, really looked. And suddenly nothing about her seemed accidental. Cadet Jacob Lynn didn't move at first. His eyes stayed locked on the laminated tag that read, Shadowhawk, even as soft laughter rippled through the corridor. Most of the other cadets hadn't seen it. They were still watching Evelyn Hart like she was an anomaly, a harmless one. An old woman out of place in a building that pulsed with testosterone and hierarchy. But Jacob knew better. He'd read the FOIA reports. He'd followed the declassified threads. Shadowhawk wasn't fiction. That name had come up in reference to Operation Talonfrost, a mission that had gone dark for over a week in northern Pakistan. The extraction report was almost completely blacked out, except for one line: Operator Shadowhawk, objective retrieved, airspace cleared, status unknown. Unknown. Until now. Jacob stood, quietly. He didn't wait for permission. He walked across the hall, each step deliberate, like he was approaching a piece of history come to life. "Ma'am," he said, voice low, respectful. Evelyn looked up. Her face was unreadable. Not cold, not welcoming, just calm. "I saw your tag," Jacob said. "Your call sign." He hesitated, then asked the question no one else had dared. "Are you really Shadowhawk?" A pause. She didn't nod. She didn't smile. But something in her eyes shifted. A faint spark behind the calm, as if recognition had passed silently between them. Behind Jacob, Cadet Doyle was growing agitated. "Cadet Lynn!" he barked. "Return to your station!" But Jacob didn't move, because he hadn't imagined it, and the woman in front of him hadn't denied it. At the security desk, Tech Sergeant Reyna Ortiz, one of the admin staff, had been listening. She stepped forward. "Cadet Doyle," she said. "She's on the clearance list. Instructor-level access. Major Riley confirmed it this morning." Doyle frowned. "She still doesn't have visible ID. That violates standard." "She's prior service," Ortiz cut in. "Escort optional. You want to radio Riley and contradict his directive?" Doyle fell quiet. And then, something subtle happened. Evelyn adjusted her sleeve. As she did, the fabric of her jacket rose just enough to reveal a tattoo on the inside of her forearm. 2 blades crossed beneath a diving hawk. Black ink, faded but unmistakable. A corporal walking past stopped mid-step. His eyes locked onto the ink, and his entire posture shifted. Not out of curiosity, out of recognition. Because that symbol didn't exist in any formal military handbook. But in whispered circles, it meant something. Shadow Unit 9, unofficial, unacknowledged, used when nothing else worked. Doyle followed the corporal's gaze, saw the tattoo, and for the first time he hesitated, not because of a rank, not because of a badge, but because something primal in his training told him, this woman is not what you thought she was. And then the hallway doors at the far end swung open, without ceremony, without announcement, just quiet footsteps and the shift in atmosphere that comes when someone important enters a room. General Thomas M. Ridley stepped into view. Sharp uniform, weathered face, eyes that had seen too much, and still saw everything. The cadets snapped to attention. Conversation stopped. The laughter vanished like smoke. He walked slowly, eyes scanning the room. Then his gaze found her, and the moment his eyes landed on Evelyn Hart, he stopped. A long breath. A recognition not just of identity, but of respect earned in places no one dared to mention. He raised a hand, not to shake hers, but to salute. And when he spoke, his voice carried through the silent corridor like thunder. Shadowhawk, welcome home. The mentorship session was scheduled for 0900 in briefing room B, but no one remembered that. Not after what happened in the hallway. General Ridley didn't escort Evelyn inside. He walked beside her, but just barely. Because there was a subtle message in the way she moved ahead. She didn't need an escort. Not here, not anymore. Inside the room, cadets who'd once whispered and scoffed now sat ramrod straight. Chairs that had squeaked in lazy protest earlier were now perfectly aligned, knees forward, backs off the wall. Cadet Doyle sat 2 rows from the front, no longer smirking. He looked like someone waiting for a storm he knew he deserved. Evelyn didn't stride to the podium. She didn't clear her throat or tap the mic. She set her duffel down, sat, then stood again, slowly. "I was told this session was about leadership under fire," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried like a memory you couldn't forget even if you tried. "But fire doesn't always mean bullets," she continued. "Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's disbelief. Sometimes it's a hallway full of people looking at you like you wandered into the wrong room." A pause. No one shifted. No one dared. "I'm not here to impress you. I'm not here to tell war stories or rattle off operations I can't name in public." She reached into her bag, pulled out a folded strip of cloth. It was an old patch, blackened with age, 2 crossed daggers, a diving hawk. It wasn't decorative, it was earned. "Most of what I've done," she said, placing it gently on the desk, "can't be taught in a room like this, and most of the people I did it with aren't around to explain it." A few cadets bowed their heads. Jacob Lynn watched every word like it was being etched into his bones. "You don't lead because someone gives you rank," Evelyn said. "You lead when everything's broken, and people look to you because they've got nowhere else to look." Doyle raised a hand. Hesitant. Small. "Yes, Cadet?" she asked. "What do you do?" he began. When no one believes you belong." Evelyn didn't flinch, didn't smirk. She just stared straight at him. "You prove it," she said. "Not with your voice, with your actions, with your stillness when the room expects noise." And somehow, that hit harder than any reprimand. Another cadet spoke. "How do you earn trust again after you've lost it?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "Don't explain, don't justify, just show up different, and let the change speak louder than your defense." She turned to Jacob Lynn. "You had a question earlier." He hesitated. "Yes, ma'am." "Zulu corridor. Was it you?" A beat. "I'm not here to talk about Zulu," she replied. "I'm here to talk about today. About you. About what you'll carry when your rank no longer shields you. When the uniform is gone, and the only thing that speaks for you is how you stood under pressure." A soft knock came at the door. Admin Officer Ortiz stepped in, eyes wide. She handed Evelyn a folded form. "Permanent base access," she said. "Signed by the General. He said, no more questions at the gate." The room didn't erupt in applause. There were no standing ovations, just silence. The kind of silence you only hear after something sacred has happened. Evelyn folded the paper once, tucked it into her jacket, and nodded her thanks. Then she turned to the cadets one last time. "If you learn anything from me today," she said, "learn this. The world won't always see your value right away, but that doesn't mean it isn't there." She let that sink in. You don't fight for the spotlight. You fight for the people behind you, the ones who don't make it home unless you do your job perfectly and quietly. Then she added, "Leadership isn't noise, it's presence, and presence is earned." She stepped back. No notes, no PowerPoint, no credentials on display, just the weight of experience so deep it didn't need explaining. And as the cadets filed out, slowly, thoughtfully, not one of them looked at Evelyn Hart the same way again. Outside the briefing room, the academy grounds looked the same concrete walkways, same clipped grass, same flags flapping in the breeze, but something had shifted. Cadets moved more slowly, conversations dropped to hushed tones, not because someone told them to whisper, but because you don't raise your voice in a place where something sacred just happened. Doyle sat on a bench near the quad, the same Doyle who'd once laughed at Evelyn's boots. Now he stared at the concrete, his name tag catching the afternoon sun. He didn't look ashamed. He looked changed, like someone seeing their own reflection for the first time and not quite liking the view. Jacob Lynn stood by the edge of the walk, still clutching the patch Evelyn had handed him. The edges were frayed, the threads worn, but to him, it felt like armor. Across campus, Officer Ortiz fielded calls from faculty who wanted to verify what they'd just heard. Yes, she confirmed. Evelyn Hart. Call sign. Valkyrie. Yes, General Ridley cleared her. Yes, she's that Valkyrie. The disbelief didn't last long, because people had heard the stories. The pilot who flew blackout routes in hostile airspace, the operator who refused medals because her team never made it back whole, the woman whose silence had become legend. At the main gate, the MP on duty adjusted the access roster. Evelyn's name now topped the priority clearance list. No more questioning, no more waiting in the lobby. Inside the admin building, Cadet Mendes lingered awkwardly by the vending machines. His beret sat crumpled in his hands. Earlier that morning, he'd stood tall, full of protocol and posture. Now he looked like someone relearning how to stand. He saw Evelyn pass by the glass. Windbreaker, duffel, same calm pace. And in that moment, he didn't see a civilian. He saw a lesson, a reckoning, a mirror. She caught his eye. He opened his mouth to speak, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain. But she stopped him with a small nod. Not dismissive, not cold, just enough. You weren't wrong to ask for ID, her expression seemed to say. You were wrong to think I needed your permission to be here. Evelyn didn't pause, didn't linger. She moved like someone with nothing to prove, and no interest in proving it anyway. Later that evening, cadets gathered in dorm hallways and mess tables. They talked less about drills, more about presence. They repeated her words like scripture. You earn it by listening harder than you speak. You lead when everything's broken. Silence can say more than shouting ever will. Some of them wouldn't remember her name the next week, but they would remember how they felt when the general said Valkyrie. They would remember the silence that followed. They would remember her. And the next time they saw someone walk in without ribbons, without stripes, without the sharp edges of visible authority, they'd look twice and think once, because Evelyn Hart didn't change the rules. She reminded them who the rules were supposed to protect. Not the loudest, not the prettiest, but the ones who've carried weight without recognition. The sun dipped lower behind the Griffin Academy flagpole, casting long shadows across the quad. Some cadets had returned to drills. Some hadn't moved from their benches, but all of them had changed. Evelyn Hart crossed the lot with the slow, unhurried stride of someone who no longer needed an audience to know her worth. She reached her car, tossed the duffel into the back seat, and paused before getting in. From the rearview mirror hung an old flight patch, the same Raven and Blades insignia she had shown earlier. For a long moment, she simply looked at it, the breeze tugging gently at her windbreaker sleeve. Then she smiled. Not the smile of triumph, the smile of someone who had finally said the thing no one else could. Back in the admin building, Cadet Landry stood at the edge of the lot, holding her old unit patch like it was a medal. He didn't chase her this time. He just watched. Because now he understood. She didn't come back to be seen. She came back so they could learn to see. Inside the dorms that night, conversations ran deeper. Words like honor and leadership felt heavier now, as if they meant more than just training manuals or rank. Cadets didn't speak of her like a myth anymore. They spoke of her like a standard. And Mendes, once so sure of his rulebook, stayed behind to reread the Academy code. Not to look for loopholes, but to understand what he'd missed.